I think that when it comes to learning to draw the body, it really does help to learn techniques from other artists. So I'm going to be sharing some of my ideas about body construction in this video. They are quite personal to me, so if you do apply some of these lessons, you will probably start drawing a little bit like my style, because it does have a lot to do with how I see things and how I construct them. So this is especially to help you in storyboarding from your imagination, but it's also a very good tool when constructing things from reference. But mainly it's for the idea that you're creating the human body from your imagination, and so these are a few tools that can help you do that. Although I will say that it's not an anatomy tutorial and it's not a proportions tutorial. Those aren't really my strong suits. So if you do want to learn about anatomy, there's quite a few channels you can look at, but not mine. And yeah, proportions as well. The proportions might be a little bit out at times, but it's not my strong suit either. So just keep that in mind, that these won't improve those skills of yours, these tricks. They will just make your characters a lot more recognizable, and it will help you to get down something really quickly, because I have to draw like hundreds of these poses. So it's really important that these tricks work for me. Here's some examples from one of the animations that I'm working on recently. These are just some of the drawings from there, so you can see it's very loose, very quick, but it just gets the idea across of what the character's doing, how they feel at that time and stuff like that. Yeah, that's practice there. Let's see. Okay, so the main little technique I want to show you guys is the sequence of the procedures that I think you should take when constructing something. So the first one is the line. This can also be known as the center line or the gesture. You don't have to draw it first, but I do kind of recommend that the first thing you take down when you're drawing something from your imagination is very gestural. It doesn't have to be a single line, but you know, it should be one of the main lines that's the longest and that's defining the pose. So here I've done a little example step by step. So we've got the top of the head here, and I marked the top of the head and the shoulders in as well. If I was actually being good, I should have also just marked in the feet where that is, and that would help me to get quickly get down the proportions of the height. So then I would know that, you know, the pelvic floor would be in there, and you know, the shoulders would be in here. So that's also what I should have done, but I didn't, because a lot of these things I teach sometimes don't actually do every time, because you know, time constraints, and also sometimes I just feel confident enough to just skip certain procedures. Anyway, that's me just creating excuses for myself. So then once it's from line, it goes to shape. Now shape is the 2D version of form, so it's like the shape is what can stand out in a silhouette and what can be read very quickly from the human eye. So in this, I sort of get down the shape, but it's still a bit flat. It's not got this 3D quality to it, but the shape is there. So then once that's there, then I start adding little pieces here and there that will suggest that the thing has got form, and that it's like a thing that you can touch and you know, rotate, and yeah. So it kind of needs to be both of these things. It needs to be a 2D shape and it needs to be a 3D shape. And that's quite a weird concept to think about, but it's got to appeal to our sense of 2D aesthetics, but it's also got to have a little bit of believability in there, especially if you've got an environment which has a certain perspective where it needs to fit with that perspective. You know, side-on things usually don't need as much of the form to be prominent, but you know, especially if you've got like a 3D grid on the ground or something, it's going to be really helpful. So here you can see that I just kind of create this body silhouette shape, and then I add these little rings in places. I like to do them like kind of cross sections, like where the hip is, maybe on the arm joints if you like. Give the head a bit more of a, you know, more of a sculpted feel instead of just this, because this doesn't really show what it is in 3D space. So yeah, rings are pretty useful for that. Okay, so that's my main method. That's like the kind of overview of this entire thing, is that. And just a bit more on the form, sort of every detail will eventually be affected by the form. So any kind of clothing folds you have on, any you know, if it's a necklace or something, any kind of watches, wristbands, shoes, they're going to be affected by this 3D form. If you've ever worked in 3D, think of it as like the texture mapping mapped onto the 3D model. That's kind of what you're doing when you're adding detail to something. So I've tried to do it here. It's not the best example, but you know, they kind of wrap around, and it all supports the form. So yeah, the other thing is when thinking about the body construction, one thing that is quite useful in certain parts of the body, in quite a lot of parts of the body, is this idea that the body is like a jigsaw puzzle and it fits together. Everything sort of slots into place. The body is a really amazing piece of organic technology, and everything just slots very neatly into place and works very seamlessly with each other. So here are some examples of where things seem to just slot together, and it's a lot to do with the bone structure, but mostly to do with the muscle and how the muscle fibers weave in with one another. So here you can see on the deltoid, between the deltoid and the bicep and tricep, on the knee. I'm not great at drawing legs, by the way, so you know, these might not be completely anatomically correct, especially, you know, knee anatomy is very difficult. But also I should say that I didn't use reference when using any of these. So I was using completely my visual library when I was drawing these. So they are a bit stylized, and they are just going off of what I remember about the body. So with the hands as well, the fingers kind of slot into the hand, into the palm, which is really interesting. And then that hand, it's always really on the joints, but that hand slots onto the wrist in a certain way. And I've taken a bit of creativity here, but I've still shown that it's slotted on in a way. And here I've outlined the form, just showing that it's a bit 3D. And this is one of my favorite ones here. This is the neck, how the neck slots onto this torso, and how it sort of, it's not just sort of connected very lightly. It's really, it goes into the form. A good way of exercising this is actually to take a shape like a sphere, and try and draw a kind of spherical shape like that. And then if you draw something like this 3D object, and then if you imagine that you have to connect the two, so you have to connect this one onto this one, how would that look when it's, you know, facing it, and how would you connect it well so that it's believable like that? So that wasn't the best example, but that idea helps me a lot when constructing the body. This is just a small point I wanted to make, that overall, in terms of male and female, on the male, these kind of slots and how they kind of fit into place, they're a lot more pronounced, and you can see them a lot better. So like, you know, on the neck, on the biceps, the triceps, the forearms, the deltoids, certainly on the deltoids, you'll see a lot more of that separation. you'll see exactly where they fit together in terms of the muscle fibers. And with the women, they're more sort of they melt together, and that's usually because women have a higher body fat percentage than men, so you can see less of the muscle fibers. There's this sort of even spread of fat over the body in general. There are exceptions to all of these, of course, and also as a result of this, the men have harder muscle. It's physically harder and more hard, and and therefore it's more angular. So you might get these kind of sharp angles, and I actually quite like to exaggerate these. These are two, this one's an original character from an animation concept I'm working on, and this one's just a random character that I just drew for the purpose of this video. So yeah, so now we're gonna have a look at the different types of construction. These are just constructions that I've noticed people make in the animators community, and my sort of commentary on them. So I started off with my kind of construction. This is very characteristic of something that I would make especially if I was in a hurry and I just wanted to quickly make something. Mine would look a little bit like this, but it does vary a little bit, but this is the kind of thing that I make. And so there are a few problems with mine. Generally I don't do enough of the form shaping, so it turns out a bit flat, especially on things like the legs. They can look a little bit flat, so it could look a bit like a kind of cardboard cutout of a person if you put it into like a 3D environment with this kind of meshed floor. If you had an environment like that, it might look a bit like too flat. But yeah, these arms are very characteristic of my style. The arms don't really look like that in real life, so I guess there's an authenticity problem with my style. But there's a few good things about it, I guess. Starting to add volume on things like the hips and the torso. I really like to add volume there, and of course on the head, I like to just, at least in a quick construction, I at least like to show where the head is facing if I can. Okay, so this is one that I've seen quite a lot of with animators. Not sure if I completely like it, but it's a bit better than some other styles that I've seen. Okay, so the head separate from the body, I don't actually mind this that much. Funnily enough, the neck is one of those things that especially with male characters, it's not very well missed. So if I see a character, a very stylized construction where the head isn't attached to the body, there's no neck, I don't actually mind it that much. But I still prefer to have it in with my style. There's a bit of a problem with authenticity with certain audiences. Some audiences might reject the fact that there are no necks on your characters, at least for the rough stage. Maybe you add them in later, I don't know. So the arms, these arms, that's where the real problem is for me, is the arms. They're not very descriptive, and because you're starting the line there and then you're drawing a joint and then drawing it there, it's very broken up and they're not sort of flowing in the general direction that you want. So that's my sort of that's what I don't like about them. Also, these joints are just ugly, and they're not how a human joint feels at all, especially on the elbows and the knees. So you'll have a real problem with gesture if you're doing these kind of constructions, I think. But they are very quick. If you want to just do a quick motion, like someone going to pick something up from the floor, I reckon it would be very quick to do. And also, because this is just a box and it's not a 3D box, if we're drawing it see-through, it might look like that. You see, that would be better. But if it's just 2D, then how are you going to draw him? How are you going to draw him picking up the box from the floor when he bends over? What's going to happen to that shape? Is it going to be like a sheet of paper and go like that is going to be completely flat, you know, it would give it away. So you've got to put in these things. You're going to have to put them in at some point when you're animating the character. So I would just put them in as he's standing there, because then that gives you a better idea of the construction and the form when you go to animate him. So yeah, it's not the worst one, but I would suggest moving up to something like this. And the step from this to this is not very difficult. You've just got to get used to doing certain techniques with the arms and the legs. The lightning bolt technique is pretty good. So this is where you kind of go like this. You see that? So this part here, that's all one brush stroke. And then these you fill in, or you do what I do, which is like that. So it runs all the way down to the tips of the fingers sometimes, and then you draw in the joints like that. That's my way of doing it that I created. But you just got to get used to doing that. Here's another one I saw an animator do, and this guy who was using his constructions like this was exceptionally talented, and so he made the silhouettes work very well. But most people will really struggle if they try and just draw an outline all in one brush stroke around the figure. I tried it here and I struggled. Like, that was all in one brush stroke for me, going around this figure, and I found that difficult. I found it difficult to keep everything in check, you know. But also, one of the biggest problems with this is that it's extremely flat. If you thought this was flat before, well, this is like the most flat you can get. It's so 2D. You see, all you got to do now is just add in a few of these things here, and already it's starting to look a little bit more 3D, but you've got to go and put them in. If you're very good at doing these outlines, then maybe you can do the outlines first and then add these things in. I think you're going to find inconsistencies, major inconsistencies in the anatomy and the proportions if you do this. Like I said, I'm not the best at proportions, but this will make that even worse if you try and just, if you try and outline things just by going round like this, if that's the head, you're going to come into a lot of problems because it's just too much for your brain to process as is going round. It seems like a really quick shortcut, but it's just too much. Okay, this is the other one. These diagrams, they're just talking about something else. But this one is good, right? It's very thorough. It definitely feels like it's 3D. It's in perspective, so you got like, I should have drawn this before, but it's got like a walkway of let's say that it's like that, so that it's in 3D space, and it definitely looks like that, and it's got a lot of detail on it. And that's part of the problem, is that this took quite a while to draw with all these different rings and stuff. It didn't take like a massive amount of time, but it did take quite a long time to draw. So if you're looking to get through something really fast, if you're doing animation where you're hand drawing it, it will take a little while, but it is more thorough. The other thing is that if you're constructing it piece by piece, so maybe if you construct it just one piece at a time, so you construct that first and then you construct the next part and then the next part. And I have done this in certain demonstrations sometimes, because I do sometimes like to do it. The hold up is that your gesture will probably struggle to shine through. With this, we've got a sort of this kind of gesture, which is fairly lazy. It could be pushed a little bit more. But yeah, that's something that you will struggle to maintain if you're doing it piece by piece. But yeah, this is a good one. It's solid, it looks fine, and it gets the thing across to the audience. That's the main thing, but it does take a little bit of time. Okay, these are ones that I definitely don't suggest you do, and they are ones that I see quite a lot with animators. So if you are someone who does these, I suggest you don't. I used to do this one a little bit. I went through a phase of doing this. I call it the snowman construction, and it's where you have a big old circle at the bottom and a big old circle at the top. A bit like an insect, like this is the anther or something. Yeah, don't do it. It doesn't... that's not how the underlying construction of the human body, you know, the skeletal system and the musculature, it's not how it works. So there's nothing under here that looks like that. It kind of, you know what it reminds me of? It's kind of like in Victorian times where they would try and understand how an animal would work before they had any idea of anatomy, and they would think that, like, let's say a rhinoceros, and I'm going to try and draw a rhinoceros. This is a bad idea. But they would think that there's like machines going on inside here. They'd think there's a combustion machine engine here and a drive shaft here and stuff. And it's like, no, it's all wrong. That's not at all what's going on inside. So this will really mess you up if you try and then draw it from like the side, and you try it again, and then you try and draw it like this, and it's like it doesn't look authentic at all, and people will be able to tell immediately, oh, something's wrong with this. So yeah, that's one to stay away from. And also this one, which is very similar to this, except it's not so prominent in the chest area. It's more to do with the joints, and this is where you've got sort of balls like this, and they're joined together by just two lines, and then you do the next one, or maybe it's like, you draw them out like this and then you connect the dots. Joints don't really look like that. There's only a few ball and socket joints in the body, and that's here, 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 and here, so definitely don't characterize the rest of them like that. And because there are hinge joints as well, but even so, these ball and socket joints are like tiny. If you look at the skeletal system, the ball and socket itself is very small, and the muscle over it does not look like a ball and socket at all. So that's going to just mess you up. They need to have a little bit, at least a little nod to the anatomy. Like, I'm not an expert at anatomy, but at least I acknowledge the anatomy a little bit underneath my construction. So this one wouldn't do. And as you might have noticed that I've drawn them front on, and that's the only way you'll really be able to draw them. And when you start drawing them side on, you'll almost immediately come into problems with these joints. They're not going to look like what you want to draw. And yeah, he looks like a robot, so I wouldn't draw them. And these joints waste time. You can do that, and that's actually much better. It's got a nice flow of energy through there. You just join a little bit there to add form and construction to it. That's got if you just do something as simple as that, you see that was faster, and it's got this lovely flow of energy all the way through the arm. Yeah, and of course stick figure. This is a really badly drawn stick figure, so I'm kind of exaggerating how bad these things are, but I wouldn't recommend drawing a stick figure. So this is a further breakdown of my characteristics, my style in making these animated constructions. The pelvis, rather, I've just made that as a sort of 3D block. I guess what's important to look at is the angle of it, that the front side is tipping down a little bit and the back is going up, because we naturally have this shape in our spine which looks a bit like this. Wait, let me do that again. And there's even a condition you can get, I can't remember what it's called, osteoporosis or something like that. And that's where the condition is where over time gravity acts on that, and you get this like really badly, and that's what causes old people to have hunches and stuff. It's because gravity just over time just acts on that. But yeah, that's digressing into different topics, but you should show a little bit of that to give the body a natural rhythm anyway. Here's a few more drawings of the waist, the pelvis. I don't really draw it like this that much. In fact, often I sort of draw it as this kind of thing, which is more just like a cylindrical shape. And that tends to just about, I get away with it basically. And you know, the stomach's in here, the lungs are like here, chest is here, you know. Anyway, I'm drawing way too fast, it's looking terrible. Yeah, maybe you look up someone else for those, because it's not my strong point. Okay, this is the arms. I really like drawing arms, and I see them as a little bit like ribbons, or like tapered tubes. And I have a certain way of drawing it, and it looks like this. This is actually a step-by-step of how I drew this one here. And you can see that I started out with these two lines, and it's really important actually, the lines and their relationship to one another, because their relationship to one another also dictates the thickness of the arm at any given point. So these are going to require quite a lot of practice for you to get right. But then once you do, they're really quick and easy, and they have this lovely continuation of energy all the way down to the tips of the fingers, which is going to look really nice, I think. I'm pretty pleased with how they turn out a lot of the time. Yeah, the anatomy's not great, but it gets it across what it is. And then here I've, you see when the arm is up like that, I've broken it into two, but I've still drawn it with one line. See, that's just one line there, and then the rest I've just drawn on. I could definitely, you know, go back to these and further chisel away these anatomy problems. You know, this is like a first pass. I do like to sort of go through again and again and just refine every time, but I'm holding back because I don't have enough time to do that. Here's another few examples of the arm. That's the waist. That's kind of a weird one, but yeah, I just thought I would just show how. Okay, so shoulders are kind of like this beam across, or like a seesaw. You know, if one side goes up, the other goes down. So maybe just keep that in mind. I think it's about to crash. Oh no. You don't have to listen to my advice on feet, because I'm not that great at drawing feet. That's not a great drawing of a foot though, but I'm just trying to explain how the foot works. This is a big breakthrough for me, and so it should be a big breakthrough for you as well. This part. So there's two areas of the foot that your foot can be balancing on. It can be on the balls of the foot, the ball of the feet, or on the heel. And when the heel is off the ground, there's this sort of plane here, but then it kind of, I can't explain it, but it slopes down, and then there's this plane here. So if you imagine, this plane has got all the weight on it, so all the weight is going onto this one, and this plane is kind of like in reserve, ready to go down, or the whole thing is going that way. Like you might see that in a running animation. You might see okay, so there's the base, there's that, then the heel, and it might just be about to take off, and then, you know, it would go like that. Oh, that's getting pretty abstract. I need a bit more time to do something like that. All right, moving on. The neck. So this is a really interesting one. I think I'm right with this, but yeah, I think that basically the cross section of the neck looks something a little bit like this. It's a little bit triangular, perhaps. I guess you could even characterize it more as being like a rounded outwards triangle shape. That's probably simpler, actually. I mean, I even went into a little bit of the anatomy here. Like, you got the spinal cord occupying this area, muscles here, and your food and air and stuff goes that way, and you got the vocal cord. But that's not really important. I don't know why I said that. So here are a few little things that I've actually corrected. People who have asked for feedback from me, I've corrected them on this before. This isn't an anatomy lesson. It's just for construction, for getting something that's believable to your audience. So one of the things that is a big breakthrough for me, the neck slopes up and it keeps going at the back. Okay, so it's not this thing where it's like, you know, there's a ball there and they sort of go to the same level. Okay, this back of the neck goes up way further because the brain kind of sits on top, and here you've got your face. We'll go into that in a little bit more on one of the next slides. The other thing is that there is this flesh on your chin here. There's this fleshy bit, and that connects to the neck. It connects your chin, almost the front of your chin, to the neck. So I see people missing this out, and it looks a bit odd. So I sometimes see a head. I want to hold on. Let me just. I sometimes see people do a head like this. All right. Yeah. Actually, this. Yeah. It's like this, and then like this. Okay. Now it's this bit that gets to me probably the most. This is how it looks like a mannequin doll or something, because there's none of this fleshiness that connects this. So in my drawing, I've pointed that out, that you've got this flesh that connects here. Also, you see, if you're drawing a box, this is a trap that people can fall into. If you're drawing the character and he's got like a box for a frame, that flat of the box, that's going to be annoying for me. So it's not like that. It's kind of a slope because you've got the traps here, the trapezius muscle, which kind of activates the shoulders. It moves the shoulders around, and it connects to the neck and the wider back. So you got this on a slope here. That's what I've pointed out here. A slope forwards. Yeah, so that's all I get into with the neck. But yeah, I've tried to do a bit of a cross-section idea of what the neck might look like when it's connected to the traps and stuff. So they really, a little bit more than that actually, they kind of sink into the form, so the traps can go like, you know, they're kind of covered by the traps a little bit. And there's this weird collarbone part here. If you look, it does actually kind of sink into there. It joins up completely. You know, you can feel on your own body where these things match up, and that can help when you don't have reference available to you. Yeah, so the other thing with this, of course, is the head and the face is all wrong, but we'll get into that on one of the next bits. I just made a video about the female body and about the breasts, so I'm not going to go into this in much detail, but just remember that they are filled with fluid, and or more of a kind of fleshiness and a bit of fluid, quite a bit of fluid. so they're affected by gravity a lot, and they're very soft. So the skin kind of joins onto the entire area around, and it joins it fairly seamlessly. So they're not very well defined. They're not cut. So if you've got you know, the chest area and you've got it like completely shrink wrapped around like this, then that's probably not behaving entirely correctly. It would be more like, you know, it would merge with the surrounding area. So just keep that in mind. And I'm not going to say more on that because I've got another video about it. The pectoral muscles, this is I always imagine them as being like steaks, like just a big block of meat that is like just slapped onto the chest. So they're flat, they're fairly rigid. I mean, you can draw them like, you know, if you drew like a bodybuilder, then maybe they would sort of come out a little bit. If you were looking at it from the side, maybe they would protrude a little bit more. But mainly they're sort of flat, and I think they look better like that personally. Maybe a little bit more defined because the men typically will have a slightly higher muscle mass and lower body fat. Just stereotypically, I mean, not for all cases. Okay, so now we'll get onto the face just briefly. I mean, the face requires a lot of tutorials on its own, and I'm not the best at it. I have my own kind of method, but I thought I would just touch on it briefly, because how can you not talk about the face? I like to imagine it as a mask at times when I'm constructing it, and that does help quite a lot, I think, because then you can start tackling it from any angle you want, and you just think to yourself, it's a mask, so I'll just, you know, I'll draw the mask first, and then it just gives you a reference point for everything else. And the mask also really helps with the hairline and things. So you know, sometimes it might be difficult to remember where does the hair begin and where does the hair end. With the mask, that helps a lot, because it helps separate the face from the head. So yeah, these are shapes that I like to use. I actually like to draw kind of slightly random shapes and then make them into faces. That can be a really good exercise. But particularly these kind of triangular faces, or like kind of you know, with 4 vertices and 4 lines. I like to draw these and then make faces out of them, and you can get them on nice angles then. And as you can see, with these different angles, the face as a mask does make different shapes to what it does on the side plane or on the front plane. So yeah, try that as an exercise, and you'll start learning that, you know, these shapes can be really good for making these faces. Oh yeah, also there's kind of once you've done this, when you go further into creating it past the construction, there are things like, you know, I would recommend kind of drawing a muzzle area, and the muzzle is the nose and the mouth and the chin. So here it's kind of protruded on this person, and that varies very much depending on who you're taking reference from. Yeah, and also just remember that the brain doesn't go down to like here in line with the chin. Okay, it sounds obvious when I say it, but it's not obvious, and lots of people fall for it. This isn't like a head like that. Actually, it's more like that, you know. But the way I start it before even this is I started with that, which is the plane of the face, that which is the top of the head, something like that, which is the back of the head, and look at the difference between those two. Okay, and then the neck will connect to the base of the head, and then that gives the chin room to occupy maybe half of this width. The chin lines up with the ear, so the ear goes before that. The eye will match up almost completely with the ear, which will also coincidentally be halfway down the face. So there you can see that I've got a bit of adjusting to do. He had a bit of a tall chin, so there, I put the eyes in. So the eyes would have to be halfway down the head, but also in line with the ears. And yeah, you can add a bit more room on there, I guess. That's what my instincts are telling me to do. And also that the eyes, remember the eyes they're not boxes that are just flatly displayed onto the head. They're ball and socket. So there's a ball, the eyeball in there, and then there's the socket. So from the front, you're seeing less of the socket. So you would actually see less of the eye. It would be kind of more squashed. And then, draw the muzzle on the front if you like. If the character has a prominent muzzle, you can draw that, protrusion of the lips or whatever. That should kind of help. I'm not going to, go much further past that, because I don't actually think much further past that when I'm drawing a head. In fact, a lot of the time I think of a lot less information than that. You got to think about how much information is necessary to get across. If you're doing a close-up shot of the character and he's deep in thoughts and you want to convey that, then yeah, consider all of those things and more. If this guy is a guy in a crowd in the background, you won't need to think of even that much stuff. You could think of it just as like a kind of, if he's a real background character, you could think, oh yeah, the head is just kind of there it is, it's just that dot. So it depends on how much information is worth even considering processing. Okay, this is just a real quick end to the video. Joining the body with lines in interesting ways. So here you can see that with the arms down, the line goes, a single continuous line goes from there down to the wrist, or even down to the hands if you're me. Here you can actually do some interesting things, like you can join up both arms, so the entire arm span of someone you can draw in one line. I've done it here, and then you can sort of erase here, draw the chest and what have you. Here's another thing that I find myself doing. I draw a circle first for the head, and then I step it up with more information. So then I draw the different faces of the head, the top, the flat kind of top. So that's an example of starting off with low detail and then bumping up the detail a little bit gradually. You don't want to come in with loads of detail straight away. These are some really fun things to draw if you ever want to, if you want to ever want to animate something really interesting. These kind of poses. So here I drew some continuous lines for both legs going outwards, so you can do that on certain things, and here I even did from the tip of the top of the arm a continuous line down to the tip of the toe. You need special kind of poses like this to do that in the kind of star shape, but that's really fun, and it's very interesting. You can also do some things where you go from one knee round to the other knee like that, so that joins into the waist, but that can be a little bit inaccurate, but it's see if you can do it like that. I tend to do all of those kind of tricks and more. Here I just went, it wasn't it's not as well drawn, but I kind of go all the way round like that. I think the line started there and went down to there. And this really unites the whole body under a single energy and cause. It treats the body as a whole. You're not seeing it as different parts now. You're seeing it as the person as one, and everything, every fiber in their body is engaged in whatever they're doing. All right, so that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something to take away and to add to your toolkit for making animations and drawing characters. Maybe you're storyboarding, maybe you're creating a comic book and you want to get a quick tie down. These should be really helpful. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. I've got a ton of videos on my channel and loads more to come in the future, and I've got some really cool plans for the future, but right now I'm very busy with stuff, so some of those plans have to wait. But yeah, consider subscribing, and also consider checking out my my website, animatorguild.com. This is where I release extra stuff as well as the tutorials. So this channel is like a part of Animator Guild, and then on Animator Guild I have more tutorials that you can access for free when you sign up to the newsletter, and it's got loads of different book recommendations, DVDs to watch, films to watch. It's got my own tutorials, it's got a forum, you can book private workshops with me to really hone your skills for making animations, loads of stuff. That's it, see you next time.